Hello, welcome to 15 minutes of Overflowing Grace with Douglas Vincent. Today I will continue with the teaching series we started titled The Grace of Giving. This is part 2. Today's topic is willingness to give. Our text is taken from 2 Corinthians chapter 8 from verse 1 to 5. I'm reading from International Standard Version. It says, "We want you to know, brothers, about God's grace that was given to the churches of Macedonia." Verse 2, "In spite of their terrible ordeal of suffering, their abundant joy and deep poverty have led them to be abundantly generous. I can testify that by their own free will they have given to the utmost of their ability, yes, even beyond their ability." Verse 4, "They begged us earnestly for the privilege of participating in this ministry to the saints." Verse 5, "We did not expect that. They gave themselves to the Lord first and then to us, since this was God's will." What is the grace of giving? The grace of giving is the divine influence upon one's heart that enables or makes one to give out of free will, or to be willing to give freely without being forced to give or manipulated to give. 2 Corinthians chapter 8 verse 3 International Standard Version says, "I can testify by their own free will they have given to the utmost of their ability, yes, even beyond their ability." Look at it. Paul said, "I can testify that by their own free will they have given." They gave out of their own free will. They were not manipulated. They were not cajoled. They were not forced to give. They gave out of their own free will. What made them to give out of their own free will was the grace of God that was given to them. Let's look at it from TLB, the Living Bible Translation, 2 Corinthians chapter 8 from verse 3 to 4. "They gave not only what they could afford, but far more. I can testify that they did it because they wanted to, and not because of nagging on my part. They begged us to take the money so they could share in the joy of helping the churches in Jerusalem." Take note that they gave by their own free will. They were not forced or manipulated. By their own free will, they gave. They gave because they wanted to give, not because of the nagging of Paul, the apostle. They didn't give because Paul forced them or manipulated them or nagged them. Let's look at it again. 2 Corinthians chapter 8 from verse 3 to 4 from TLB. "They gave not only what they could afford, but far more. I can testify that they did it because they wanted to, not because of the nagging on my part." Paul said they gave not because I nagged them to give. No, Paul said they gave because they wanted to give. They gave out of their own free will, not because Paul nagged them to give. The grace of giving makes one to give out of his or her free volition, not out of the nagging of the pastor. You don't need to push your pastor to the point of nagging or begging you or talking too much about giving in the church, or use prophecy or use dream or use threat on you to manipulate you into giving. You have to give because of the grace of God, because of the influence of the grace of God upon your heart. Let's look at it from the Message translation of the Bible, 2 Corinthians chapter 8 from verse 8 to 9. There's a lesson we're going to see from 2 Corinthians chapter 8 from verse 8 to 9 from the Message translation of the Bible. "I am not trying to order you around against your will." Did you see that? Paul said, I am not trying to order you around against your will. Paul was talking to the Corinthian church about this grace of giving. He told them, I am not trying to order you around against your will. Giving have to be out of free will, not by force, not being ordered around, not being manipulated, not being threatened to give. Paul said, I am not trying to order you around against your will. If it is against your will, then it is not grace giving. It is not the grace of giving. When we do not give out of free will, then we will be ordered around or manipulated by false prophet and false men of God. I say that again. When we do not give out of free will, then we have make ourselves to be vulnerable, to be ordered around and manipulated by false prophets, false teachers, false apostles, false pastors, false men of God. They will order us around through false prophecy, false teaching, false ideology, false philosophies of this world. Grace makes us to give freely and out of our free will. This is because it is God that works in us both to will and to do his good pleasure. Look at it, Philippians chapter 2 verse 13. For it is God which worketh in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure. It is God that works the willingness in you. The willingness to give out of your free will is the grace of God influencing your heart to be willing, making your heart to be willing. Therefore, the grace of giving is free will giving. The grace of giving is free will giving. It is being willing to give freely. It is God's grace that makes us to be willing to give freely. Grace gives us the willingness to give. Grace makes us willing to give. This willingness comes from the inside, not from any external force. I say that again. This willingness comes from within, not from external force. God works in us both to will and to do. The willingness to give comes from God. He makes us willing, and that is his grace at work in us. The grace of giving is wanting to give or having the desire to give. Grace gives the desire to give. Grace gives the desire to give. The grace of giving begins with the willingness or having the free will to give or being eager to give. 2 Corinthians chapter 8 from verse 10 to 12, International Standard Version. I am giving you my opinion on this matter because it will be helpful to you. Last year, you were not only willing to do something, but had already started to do it. Did you see it? They were willing to do something. The churches in Corinthians, and they started doing it. Verse 11. Now finish what you began, so that your eagerness to do so may be matched by your eagerness to complete it. Verse 12. For if the eagerness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what you have, not according to what you do not have. If the eagerness or willingness is there, then the gift or offering or giving is acceptable. This means that if the eagerness or willingness or free will to give is not there, then the giving or offering will not be acceptable. God accepts our offering on the basis of free will to give, on the basis of willingness to give. If you are forced to, if you are being manipulated to give and you end up giving, it is not acceptable before God. God does not accept any offering or giving that is out of free will. I say that again. God does not accept any offering or giving that is out of free will. If it is outside the boundary of your free will, you are being manipulated, you are being cajoled, you are being intimidated or threatened to give any offering in the church, it is not acceptable before God. This is because the Spirit of God, who is the Spirit of grace, does not always strive with man. God does not strive, rather he influences. I say that again. God and his spirit does not strive, rather God influences. The spirit of grace does not strive, rather it influences. The spirit of grace does not strive, rather he influences. Genesis chapter 6 verse 3. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he is also his flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. The most important aspect of this verse is this. The Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man. If there's an internal struggle, it means that you are struggling against the grace of God. If there's an internal struggle, you are struggling to give, you are not free to give, it means that you are struggling against the spirit of grace. But if you are being threatened and being coerced or being manipulated from outside to give, then it will never be accepted before God. God does not accept any offering that is not given out of free will. This means that whatever you are forced to give or you are not willing to give is not acceptable before God. I say that again. This means that whenever you are forced to give or you are not willing to give, your offering will not be accepted before God. The grace of giving is willingness, readiness of heart, and enthusiasm to give freely without being forced or manipulated to give. Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 9 from verse 1 to 7 from International Standard Version. I do not need to write to you any further about the ministry to the saints, for I know how willing you are. Paul was talking to the Corinthian church. He said, I know how willing you are, and I boast about you to the people of the Macedonian, saying that Achaia has been ready since last year, and your enthusiasm has stimulated most of them. Did you see that? They were willing and they were enthused to give. Let's jump to verse 5. Therefore, I thought it necessary to urge you these brothers to visit you ahead of me, to make arrangement in advance for this gift you promise, and to have it ready as something given generously and not forced. Let me take that again. Verse 5 of 2 Corinthians chapter 9. I'm reading from International Standard Version. Therefore, I thought it necessary to urge these brothers to visit you ahead of me, to make arrangement in advance for this gift you promise, and to have it ready as something given generously, not forced. If you are forced to give, it is not acceptable before God, and it is not the grace of giving. It is not the grace of giving. Look at verse 7. Each of you must give what you have decided in your heart, not with regret or under compulsion, since God loves a cheerful giver. God does not want us to give with regret. God does not want us to give under compulsion or force. That is the reason He wants us to give out of free will or eagerness of heart or readiness of heart. The grace of giving is divine influence upon your heart that enables you to be willing or eager or ready to give, no matter your financial status. The grace of giving is divine influence upon the heart that makes your heart ready or prepared to give. Preparation is key to giving graciously. Preparation is key to giving graciously. I want you to know that the grace of giving is all about you being ready to give, you being prepared to give, you being willing to give without being forced, without being manipulated. As I come your way next time, we are going to look at how to prepare to give graciously. Thank you and God bless you. See you next time. Bye-bye.